Right. Good afternoon, fellow villagers. Thank you for kind introduction, Andrew. I'm going to tell you the story of what my big village community, it's a small town, has been doing over the last 7 years. And I think it's an inspiring and interesting story, which literally is growing and growing. We're just waiting for the presentation to appear. And I believe at the end of the two presentations, there'll be a question and answer session opportunity. So you can quiz us both, and we can be a bit more. So I've called my presentation, Changing the World One Corner at a Time, Incredible Edible Todmorden Example of Community Food Growing in Urban Spaces and Places. So in 2007, these local people, my fellow residents, including Nick here with the chicken on his head, decided to do things differently. They were all signed up to the notion of trying to create a sustainable planet and sustainable communities and sustainable places, but knew that unless you make that principle work in the very place in which you live, work and play with your friends, children and colleagues, what's the point? Okay, so in our small town in northern England, they began to think, I think, very differently. So the aims of this presentation are to describe what Incredible Edible Todmorden have been doing over the last 7 years, and to explain to you some of the principles and what I call the transferable lessons of Incredible Edible that I think you can put into place in your own community, your own neighborhood, indeed your own village. This is a location of Todmorden. It's a star in the middle of the Pennine hillside halfway between the cities of Leeds and Manchester. Okay, and there it is. It's very beautiful. It nestles in the middle of 3 valleys. There are similarities between the topography of Hong Kong, although this is obviously a much larger place, and my own home community, in as much as they've got these very steep valleys, and we live in the bottom of the valley. So my house is here. And when you're on top of the hills, which is very beautiful, it takes 5 minutes to walk up to the top of the hill, you can't see the settlement because it's nestled down in the floodplain. This is what it looked like 150 years ago, an industrial settlement based on the manufacture of textiles. A Victorian town, polluted, not particularly attractive place in which to live, but very successful, 20,000 people. But by the middle to the late of the 20th century, the population had reduced to its current level of about 14,000 people. The jobs disappeared, the textile industry collapsed. The biggest employer in this town of 14,000 people employs 80 people, most small businesses employing 2 or 3 people. So we have an issue. What is our place for anymore? And we needed to rethink, we need to reinvent, remake, renew ourselves, and thereby come up with strategies, hopefully successful strategies, so that we could regain our community spirit. So, Incredible Edible started with the creation of what we call propaganda gardening. Some people call it guerrilla gardening. Nothing unique there. Nobody had ever tried it in our community before. And here we can see Nick and some young people putting into place, interestingly enough, without asking anybody's permission, a series of raised growing beds. So on the left-hand side, you can see Nick in the car park area of a local supermarket. In the middle, the green space, this one, you can see a simple raised growing bed on the site in front of green space in front of a derelict building. And again, Nick on the left, planting apple trees on leftover spaces. One of the other first places we started growing in was the platforms of the railway station. And there were the usual concrete planting boxes, planters, full of flowers, very colourful. We talked to the station master and said, can we take the flowers out and can we plant herbs? And they said yes. And we also noticed in the corner of the station car park was an empty space where cars couldn't park. So can we have that to grow vegetables in? They said yes. Just think how many stations there are across the planet, how many station platforms, yeah? How many station car parks, certainly in England, all over Europe, I'm sure in Hong Kong as well. And they had these opportunities. So we took that chance. Here's a space which again was full of grass and flowers next to the local community college building. So we did ask permission in this instance, and again, some small raised beds looked after by local children and their families. And throughout the talk, very quickly, I'm going to identify about 10 principles. And the first principle is incredible edible growing beds are looked after by local volunteers. There's always somebody who is responsible for each individual bed throughout the year, for growing, for maintaining it, for keeping it healthy. And that is the way to success. The other key principle is the vegetables and herbs that we plant, whether it's a railway station or anywhere across town, are there for people to collect for free. Yes? It took about a year for our community to understand, this is in a capitalist society, that there was something for free. Yeah? They think somebody owns these beds. Technically, nobody owns the beds. Somebody looks after them. And you can get off the train, as I often do, and you can pick a handful of chives or mint or basil for use in your evening meal that night. Or you can wait until the beans are ready, and you can collect those for free. And we've been doing this for 7 years. One of the great successes was there was a space in front of our police station, and we approached the station sergeant, him, and said, in this instance, we're going to ask for permission. Can we create 3 planting beds in front of your police station? His response was, well, I don't know. I will have to fill in 20 pieces of paper and forms. It will take me 6 to 9 months to get permission from the hierarchy. Oh, just go ahead and do it. So we went ahead and did it. Yeah? And so now people can collect vegetables for free from in front of the police station, and they don't feel like they're stealing things from under the noses of the policemen and women. And what happened 6 months later, the chief constable, here he is, came to Tolbaden, and there he is, smiling away, as if it was his idea. That's okay, we don't mind. So again, often as not, and I know this might be difficult in the Hong Kong context, it's easier to ask for forgiveness than it is to ask for permission. You don't always have to have the landowner's permission. This is an interesting one. We got a new health centre about 4 years ago in Tolbaden, like a small hospital. As it was being constructed, we spoke to the doctors and nurses who ran this, and we said, I bet you've got a budget for landscaping, put flowers and shrubs in. They said yes. We said, why don't you grow vegetables, medicinal herbs, and fruit trees? Use that money, can't remember how many thousands of pounds it was, to grow stuff you can eat. And they said yes, of course. They're promoting a healthy community. Why wouldn't they? And here you can see the very extensive landscape, edible gardens in and around the health centre. Another principle is, again, talk to land and building owners and work with them to create permanent or temporary growing plots on spaces yet to be developed. Transitional spaces. So we have a site which remained derelict for 2 or 3 years, right in the town centre. We spoke to the landowner, which happened to be the local council, and we said, nothing is happening because of the economic situation. Can we, whilst we're waiting for developers to come and build housing or shops or offices on this site, can we plant an edible garden? And they said yes, and here it is. It's very big, and it's very popular. And they will come along maybe in 2 or 3 years' time and want to develop it. Temporary spaces have a very interesting habit of becoming permanent, and people will not like, given how much they love this space and use it in the community, to see that temporary space removed. So we might have a fight on our hands there. And of course, the other key issue is young people. We've got 6 primary schools for students aged between 5 and 11 in Tobin and 1 high school. And all the schools are involved in the Incredible Edible Initiative. So here is one of the bigger primary schools, and they had tennis courts that they weren't using. So we talked to the teachers, and we created these planting beds in the tennis court. And here you can see the children planting them up. Here you can see a family, there it is, a family, very proud. Look how tall those beans are, of what they've grown in that space. And there's another principle. You get to the parents who are engaging with the children. And it's not that we're feeding our town of 14,000 people from these small beds. What it is we're educating people, if you like. We're encouraging them to think about where their food comes from. So the child at this school will be asked when they go home of an evening, what have you done at school today? They'll say, I planted some tomatoes. And then 3 months later, they will come back and here are the tomatoes. And then you have this discussion about where food comes from, not just the supermarket. And that's absolutely crucial to our mission, if you like. So popular, partly because of our very good website, has Incredible Edible become in the last 7 years, that for instance, last year, 1,000 people came to our small town to engage in what we call vegetable tourism. Here are some of the groups. We take guided walks around. Yeah? 1,000 people. About 40% of them came from outside of the United Kingdom. And they stay over and they spend money in the local economy. And then they go back inspired by our example and try and create, they do create, incredible edible communities in their own localities. We've embedded this guided tour into what we call the green route, and we have interpretation panels. We walk past all these growing gardens, we tell them the stories, and it is very, very popular. We also cultivate powerful and influential friends. Prince Charles is a friend of Incredible Edible, helps us out whenever he can. There he is arriving in Tobin on his own private train and being shown around. Again, publicity. In England, we have lots of famous TV chefs, and this one, Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall, comes quite regularly and films his TV show in Tobin, cooking on screen the vegetables and the produce grown by Incredible Edible. And this is part of the temporary space which we've colonized as a temporary village green. Yeah, very, very popular. So make things fun and feed people. You know, the end product of all this growing is food, after all. We do have training sessions. A lot of people don't know how to cook anymore. So we train them in how to cook the things that we and they can grow. And you grow where you can. Yeah? So one of the primary schools has no green space whatsoever, even though technically we live in the countryside. But they had a Victorian graveyard with some space at the side of their school, and they put some raised beds in, and there you go. Incredible edible communities now number 100 across the UK. Some big, some small. Incredible Edible Lambeth, big borough in London. We have an entire new website for the Incredible Edible community called Incredible Edible Network. In Wales, for some reason, they've really signed up for it. So another principle, share your expertise and become part of what we call Incredible Spreadable. Yeah? And now there are around some 300 incredible communities across the world, including a new one emerging in Hong Kong, and I'm going to see them and talk to them and share this presentation with them on Monday night as part of my visit to your fantastic city. We're reaching out. My own university last summer set up an incredible edible campus. We were only allowed by estates to create a temporary garden. A boring piece of municipal green space in the campus, there it is, right next to the School of Landscape Architecture, unbelievably. And we said to estates, can we create an edible garden there? And they said, yes, but it has to be temporary. And it only lasted 3 weeks, and these temporary planters were then taken to a street cafe nearby after the garden had been there. But the students were encouraged and inspired, and you can see how you can transfer these lessons. So another lesson is work in partnership with local government and other organisations. And this is the City Hall in Leeds and a school competition to design and grow incredible beds in the locality of the City Hall. A whole range of conclusions there. We question the way people think about public and green space and empower people to take responsibility. It's based on local action. It's about changing behaviour through strong local community initiative. It represents a bottom-up approach to tackling wider issues of climate change. It involves everybody from across the community from every background. It breaks down barriers between people by focusing on something that we all love and need, food, because it's inclusive. The phrase is, if you eat, you're in. So that's all of us. And it's celebrated as an example of joined-up thinking because it makes connections in the town so that growing food is embedded into education, health, and local businesses. It's a different way to address these serious global problems. And believe you me, has improved the sense of place and pride that local community have in their town. Recent small-scale survey identified the fact that 96% of local residents like the growing of food in public spaces, 67% collect food and herbs from these public spaces, so they use the growing beds. 97% of local residents say they buy more local food today as compared to 5 years ago, and 57% of local residents have begun to grow their own food following the example of Incredible Edible. And here is the overarching principle. Margaret Mead, an American environmentalist, there, that's what she said, and this is what we've done. And finally, there's a derelict building in the town, and we went out one night and we graffitied on it, and this is what we wrote. Ask not what your town can do for you, but what can I do for my town? John F. Kennedy's inaugural speech as the President of USA, I think 1963 or something, ask not what your country can do from you, what can you do for your country? Same principle. And it all started in Mary's garden. Here she is on the right-hand side with the other founding mothers, Incredible Edible. She turned a rose garden into a vegetable plot, looked out of her window one day, saw a mother and her daughter collecting the vegetables. The next morning, on the vegetable plot was a pot of soup with a thank you note saying, thank you for helping feed my family, this is your portion of the soup. And the most recent initiative is this. This is in the town centre, the one big supermarket. Above the supermarket, Mary paid for and erected this sign. like the Hollywood sign. What does it say? Kindness. Incredible Edible is based on kindness. There are various strategies for setting up Incredible Edible. There's 2 websites. I think they've got details in your information pack. Have a look at them, yeah? Okay, and I challenge you, go out and make a difference. Go on and be incredible. Thank you.